Welcome back to the Ken Matthews Show. We have another great guest on this report today. Kenneth, we have Kenneth and Ken on the show today. Kenneth Rapoza. Kenneth Rapoza is a industry analyst from the Coalition for a Prosperous America, also a former a foreign correspondent for the Wall Street Journal, and a senior contributor to Forbes, covering China since 2011. And he's on this show because he's a patriot and he tells the truth, and we don't censor stuff here. So welcome to the show, sir.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Ken.
So there is so much to talk about in this economy, and what really set this invitation off was an article you wrote about John Deere, and they're a wonderful example of how all these trade agreements have kind of wooed our government into putting other countries first instead of America first. And all I could think of when I was reading that article that you wrote about John Deere, which I want you to expound on, is, people like Joe Biden and others, and even some in the Republican Party, are making Mexico great again.
Well, I call Mexico the 51st state.
Yes.
Because of NAFTA, which is now USMCA, but I'll keep calling it NAFTA because everybody knows it is NAFTA and NAFTA 2.0. Let me give you a sense of what NAFTA was supposed to be, right? And what it is now, because I think it's important, because NAFTA has definitely changed. And because of this change, there's going to be an issue on Capitol Hill. They're going to have to look at this very differently. We have the new NAFTA now, which has new environmental rules. So it's the same. You can't pour chemicals down the river in Tijuana, right, anymore. Mm-hmm. Like we can't here. You can't pay, workers have to be able to unionize, and they got to be paid, whatever the wage rates are in Mexico. Obviously, they're not paid $20 an hour, obviously, right? But they're going to be paid the legal wage and get all the benefits, so that there's always going to be labor arbitrage. It's a low wage economy. Mexico's not going to make $15 or $20 an hour to make cars, period, ever. Maybe in the 2050 they will, but by then Americans will be making $80 an hour if we're still working at that point.
Yes.
But the idea of NAFTA was, we got this low-income country to our south, right next door. They're in boom and bust cycles, totally on International Monetary Fund life support from the 80s and 90s. How could we remedy the situation and turn them into a manufacturing hub for us here in the north, meaning Canada and the United States? So they did that. They did that with NAFTA. Now, Mexico is no longer on the IMF boom and bust cycle parade. They're a pretty stable economy with a pretty stable currency now, okay? The people there have gotten a little richer, especially the wealthiest. They have gotten wealthier, as is the case around the world in any economy, right? As is the case in China, that's run by the Communist Party, as is the case in the United States, which is run by, a capitalist system. So that's just how it goes. But what happened to a system that was designed to make Mexico on par with the United States and Canada has become a system, or become a trade agreement now, whereas any multinational that wants to set up shop in Mexico can and benefit from NAFTA. So they're not going to Mexico. So the Japanese steel producer isn't going to Mexico to sell steel to the Mexicans. They're going to Mexico to sell steel to us.
Yes.
And the Chinese car company, the EVs that are going to Mexico, aren't going there to sell EVs to Mexico. Maybe they are. There are very few EVs on the road in Mexico, but primarily they're there to sell EVs duty free to the United States. So because they can't do it from China, or because they can't do it from any other country that has a tariff, or because it's more expensive because their labor costs are higher, as is the case, let's say, in Japan, for example, with steel, they're just going to do it in Mexico. And so what we have now is NAFTA is now a free trade agreement for any corporation, large or small, that wants to set up shop in Mexico. Mexico will open arms to these people. They'll welcome them, happily. And again, these companies are going there not to serve the Mexican economy, but to dump and to sell product into the United States at a rate that the United States can not compete with.
Right.
We talk about China having low wages. Of course, China has lower wages, and in some cases, certainly much lower wages than Mexico. But Mexico's our next door neighbor, and China doesn't have a free trade agreement with the United States.
Exactly. Right? Well, I think that's how. And there's so many different implications that we can talk about this. We got the security aspect and the economic and the cultural aspect. But in the case of China, the Mexican border, our border with Mexico has become a joke. That's obvious. And that benefits whether you're a crime syndicate or whether you're an international company processing copper. It's advantageous to you to run your stuff through Mexico. So communist China teaches Mexican drug cartels how to make fentanyl, and then communist China sets up shop and pays $5-6 an hour to Mexican workers to make legitimate products that, like you said, duty free, they end up in our home. And the other thing is, and you could clear this up, a lot of people think that when a manufacturer goes to Mexico, it's slave labor, it's a sweatshop. No, because of the value of the dollar compared to the peso, as you pointed out, that $5-6 an hour is a great wage. People are moving up with that wage, where comparatively you'd have to pay 20 plus here. So there's so many pieces of this puzzle, but I think we're getting taken advantage of, which I would imagine you'd agree with. I think everybody and their brother is taking advantage of us with security and economy.
Let's pretend you and I have a business and we're making a widget. Now we're going to make it in Nebraska. Okay. And we're going to pay workers. We have a 25% corporate tax rate.
Mm-hmm.
You have regulations to deal with. So because we're manufacturing something, so we got to deal with emissions and all this other stuff that the United States imposes on us. But our biggest cost other than taxes is going to be wages. And the minimum wage is $15 an hour. Okay. Now you and I can do that in Nebraska because we're from there and we want to set up shop there. And by golly, we're going to do it. But our competitor in California, who makes the same widget, says, I'm going to make it in Mexico for $5 an hour. And I'm going to price it at $1 cheaper or $2 cheaper the product than what the two Kens can.
Right.
Or if I'm a publicly traded company, even worse, I'm a publicly traded company, all of Wall Street says, why am I investing in the two Kens product when their profit margin is 3%, when I can invest in the California product, which is similar, where the profit margin is 13%? And then you go, and then you and I say, well, we're having problems getting money, or we're having problems selling our products. So what are we going to do? Do we keep making it in Nebraska, or do we move to Mexico like everybody else? We can stay in business. And that is a decision that companies like John Deere, a multinational that is traded on the stock exchange, have to make every day, because they're not making 100 items. They're making 1,000 items.
Right. And
every dollar counts to these guys. And if they can save on taxes, or if they can save on labor arbitrage, of which Mexico is certainly the right idea for them to do, because it's right next door, then they're going to do that. They are going to do that. The only way they're not going to do it is if it's too hard for them to make a product and deliver it to their core market, right? Because the product is too big, right? You can't make an airplane and, it's very hard to make an airplane and ship all the airplane to China if you're making it in Seattle. It'd be easier for Boeing to JV partner in Guangzhou. It'd be easy to do that, even though it's got a Boeing, right? It's all Boeing know-how, but it's made probably in Guangzhou with the engine or whatever shipped across the seas. But
so you've got the geographical aspect of it as well, where you look at a state, take a state like Florida or Texas. I grew up in Florida, so if you ever drive from Miami, Florida to Jacksonville, I mean, it's quicker to drive from a factory a couple hours south of the border in Mexico to 4 or 5 states.
Oh, absolutely.
To make a delivery.
Absolutely.
or to commute if you're a manager. If you're an American manager, as you pointed out in your article with John Deere, they have some American managers they send down to Mexico, where I would imagine they would live like kings, right?
Oh,
just
sure.
for the economy. And then they have this excited workforce, because the countries in so many socialist countries, and I'm not a proponent of government health care, but if you look at what Obamacare did to our dynamic for businesses, the company Ken & Ken, we'll put your name first, our new company Ken & Ken in Nebraska, we have to insure all our full-time employees. And that, as you know, is like the lion's share of the headache for so many major companies. Because in Mexico, what is it, a third or maybe 20% of, so Mexico can insure you and employ you for like $6 an hour. So we're not, and just to be clear, and I'm sure you agree, we're not saying we should move out of our own country. We're saying we need to get people in government in our country to start making it work in our system, because they're the ones that initially sold out to this game. Are they not?
Well, yes, this is globalism 101, right? And if you're going to have it so that what matters most is lowering your overhead and pricing, right? Your product is priced lower. You can make it at a lower cost. Your product can be made at a lower cost. Then there's no need for the United States to have any manufacturing, because you could just make everything in Mexico. Nuevo Leon, Mexico is literally a 4-hour drive away from Laredo, Texas. That's where Tesla's building EVs now. And I'm telling you, Tesla is not going to make those EVs for the Mexican market. Maybe they'll sell 1,000 a month to Mexico, maybe. But you think that the Tesla factory in Nuevo Leon is going to turn out just 1,000 cars a month? I don't. I think they're going to turn out 5,000 cars a month, and 4,000 of them are going to go across the border, and they're going to be sold in the United States.
And what a great PR. This is such a great PR story for any company, because you could say, well, we've moved into Mexico and we're helping their economy. No, you moved into Mexico so you can get a bigger piece of our economy. And just like the new NAFTA, which is, what is it, the USMC something, LMNOP, it has Canada in it as well, right? And isn't the same shenanigans going on with Canada?
Canada is interesting because we don't have a lot of trade with Canada. We have a lot of cars that go to Canada, but mostly our trade with Canada is really commodities. It's on the oil and gas side, really, right? So our big trade in terms of the manufactured goods is really Mexico. Mexico is the most important part of NAFTA. Of course, the United States is the #1 consumer, and Mexico is really is the hub. Now, when it comes to automotive, the United States, we have a lot of partnership with Mexico. We make auto parts here, we give them to Mexico. Mexico makes the cars and comes up here, or vice versa, right? So there's a lot of cross-border transactions going on to make cars, for example. That's our biggest product that comes across the border. Maybe white line goods like refrigerators and so on as well might be a second.
And that's why you get the different parts of your car. You see a particular brand and it says, maybe the chassis assembled in Mexico, and then in Detroit or Tennessee, they'll put the rest of it together.
Yes, of course. Right. Exactly. But, look, Mexico, the idea with Mexico is, again, they're the low cost manufacturing hub on our border. And what is the incentive for an American manufacturer to invest and stay in business in the United States when either their competitor is in China, can't compete with the Chinese, forget it.
Yeah.
As we're learning now, or your competitor is saying, I'm leaving China and going to Mexico, which is not much better. So it's very difficult. So the United States needs to have some sort of policy, whether it's tariffs or whatever it is, some sort of tax incentive, whatever it may be, to protect manufacturing. And I know a lot of people don't like that word, that protectionism, right? But it's a word, and maybe there needs to be a new word. But you have to have some sort of industrial base in the United States, because companies over time are going to decide that I'm just going to either innovate my new product. That's what everybody talks about, right? America, we're going to be the cradle of innovation. Okay, that's great. We can be the cradle of innovation, but it'd be so good if you also manufacture that product, right? So you bring it to scale. So, for example, there's a company in Boston called Boston Dynamics, and they made these ugly robot dogs that we've all seen. These robots do backflips. And Boston Dynamics, I think it was in 2021, they sold to Hyundai. Okay,
I saw that.
Dynamics, they're the brains, right? They're the guys who made it. They might still keep the IP, but who's going to make all those robots in the future, 5, 10, 15 years from now, when all those robots are actually employed? Okay, or whatever. Who's going to manufacture those? Is Hyundai going to make 1,000 of those a day or 1,000 a month, whatever it is that they make in Massachusetts or in Alabama, or are they going to make it in Korea? They're going to make it in Korea.
Yeah.
The Korean guy is going to make $30,000-$40,000, the equivalent of $30,000-$40,000 a year. The robot sale, Hyundai is going to make maybe $800 million in income, right? And the Korean government's going to tax the worker at 20%, and the Korean government's going to get income to pay down its bills and whatever, and we're going to get none of that.
Right, except we might get
intellectual property rights if it's not stolen by the Chinese.
I was just going to say we're going to lose that, and then in the case of China or some of these countries that, I mean, obviously communist China, their government is an enemy of ours, But if you look at the manufacture, the cross-pollination with military, which drives me crazy, we have countries outside, we have countries making our voting technology, other countries making our military technology, our surveillance technology. We have in the US military, we have people like, well, we don't have parts for this particular tank or jet. Oh, don't worry, we've got a contract with communist China. That's who we want supplying the parts to our American military. That's why I think this is so much bigger than an economic crisis. And you said something before about not protectionism, but what did you say we had to do with our manufacturing?
Well, you have to have some sort of, you have to have like a tax incentive or tariff. You're going to have something in place that makes it attractive for manufacturers to expand over.
Right, but you used the word that you said we should stop using, and I think
you should stop using the word protectionism. I don't know what the word is to replace it, because people use that word, they don't like that word.
How about this? How about secure it?
Yeah.
I would secure it. That's the issue. We don't secure anything in this country. We don't secure our borders. We don't secure our culture. Right. Like you said, we sit here and this is one of the reasons, here comes politics. I'm a big fan of Trump, is at least on the surface, he looks like he wants to make a better work environment for what's going on here. Just based on ego alone, I don't think he likes Chinese stealing his stuff. I don't think he likes to be last. I don't know. I certainly think, just based on looking at the Biden regime, that his policies may be far from perfect, Trump's policies, but they're going to be a lot better than globalist. I think the current regime, and again, I don't know where you can comment on this or not, but I think we just have too many globalist and people that are okay with being, we're all global citizens and we all should just work together. And, maybe we'll put you in a plant in Vietnam. And no, we're the United States of America. What happened?
Yes, this is definitely of Washington's interest, right? Washington is very foreign policy intrigue. They love that. Of course, that's when Washington gets things done, right? When there's foreign policy intrigue like Ukraine war or the Israel-Palestine war or whatever war there is, then they get all excited. And that's the one thing they can all agree on. In probably 90% can all agree on it, and the voting gets done instantly. But when it comes to domestic stuff, the drama is left to the culture war, right? That's what the progressives are left to, fight for that. And the Trump wing of the Republican Party is, maybe is allowed to fight for that. But they're also, the Trump wing of the Republican Party also is the economic nationalists and the populists, right?
Yep.
And that doesn't really exist in the Democratic Party. Maybe it exists in the Bernie wing, if there is such a wing. Maybe that exists, but Bernie is so stricken with Trump derangement syndrome, and so are the progressive left of the Democrats, that the populist wing doesn't really is allowed to grow, because they would sound too much like Trump, and God forbid they agree to anything Trump says. I mean, that's like, Trump says the sky is blue and I love springtime, and instantly the headline on NPR is why springtime is harkens back to the days of white supremacy and racism. I mean, that would be you can't do that. So I think what we have to do is really, when it comes to a country like Mexico, which I believe is going to be as big a problem as China, because as we talk about decoupling from China, and as geopolitical risks are weighed by corporations who say we got to get out of China, either we're going to go to Southeast Asia, which is happening now in Vietnam, right? Vietnam, Chinese outpost. Yes. Or we're going to go to Mexico, and a lot of people might say that's great. At least they're not in China. At least we're reshoring. We're getting our supply chains closer to the United States, which alleviates a lot of the risks that we saw during COVID, when you had inflation because you couldn't get things out of Asia because of lockdowns, right? Which led to inflation, which led to shipping companies not knowing when they could ship, and prices of shipping went up through the roof, maybe 800% or so. So now it's in Mexico, so it's easier. But okay, it's all in Mexico, wonderful. But now we're going from competing with China or whatever it is an hour to competing with Mexico. Maybe Mexico makes $1 or $2 more an hour, but we're still left to say that if we want to make something in the United States, all we're really allowed to do is innovate. We can innovate the new product.
Right.
Hopefully it's not stolen by the Chinese. Hopefully it's not stolen by the Chinese. So they copy it, and so they price us out of the market, right? Hopefully not.
Yep.
Or we innovate and sell it to some, global multinational somewhere, probably somewhere in Asia, probably, as we've seen with Boston Dynamics, right?
Right.
And so the companies that are allowed to grow in the United States are the ones that now need getting some sort of government incentive or protection, like Intel and the semiconductors through the CHIPS Act. They're investing a lot because they're getting some protection from the U.S. government. But what also has to happen is, if you're going to protect like that, which is, you have to also say, okay, we're going to throw money at these industries through tax breaks and whatever. You don't have to pay taxes on this for so many years. But we also have to make sure that we restrict imports, because what's stopping the competitor in Asia from saying, oh, wait, the United States is going to take away our market and invest in, this type of legacy chip that we used to make out here in Taiwan, or that we used to make out here in Japan, or that a Japanese company made it in their factory in China, and now they're going to make it in the United States because the government is funding it. Oh, I don't know if I like that. That's a big market for us. That's $3 million a quarter. Let's make a whole lot of these things.
Yep.
Pricing 20% discount.
Flood it.
And then the buyer, Lockheed Martin, or the buyer, Amazon, or whoever the buyer may be, Dell, HP says, oh, Intel, sorry, I'm not going to buy your chip because I can get it from Panasonic or Samsung for 20 cents on the dollar. Well, how did that happen?
It's interesting. The way you're painting this picture is really showing it's really a tapestry of what the heck is going on. And communist China is so far ahead of us in planning, because usually our Congress and Senate, they plan on 2-year or 6-year basis, meaning, how is this going to benefit me in my election? Yeah. Meanwhile, communist China is telling 3 generations ago, here's our 100-year plan. By 2025, we want to dominate this. And we're going to train all our kids. We're not going to train our young men to be women. We're not going to train our women to be men. We're going to train people to be this, this, and this, and this. And we're going to do this with our military. And what China did in this chess game is, immediately, when you were describing some of those situations with having to relocate, China said, why don't we just get into Mexico? Then we'll be on our border. We'll cut deals with Mexico. We'll cut deals with Venezuela and Brazil and Paraguay and half the Middle East. We'll be right up in America's grill. What can they do? So now we have the Chinese military breathing up our butt in our country, pouring over the border. Border Patrol told me like 2 months ago that communist Chinese and Middle Easterners are starting to outnumber South Americans at certain entry points. It's a dream come true. It's a dream come true for anybody that wants to take over our economy or eventually our government. What say you?
I'll say one thing about the Chinese coming in. The Chinese economy is in trouble, and here's why. Chinese companies might not be in trouble because, just like an American company, they can outsource, they can relocate. Right? The Chinese company, just like the American or any Western company, they're not nationalists, they're globalists, right? And they say, I don't want to lose my American market. And if that means I got to set up shop in Vietnam and hire the Vietnamese, I'm going. If that means that Ford, who says, which they did say, we're not going to buy your product from mainland China, it's easier for you to set up shop in Mexico, come with us there and be next door to our factory there, going. Now, that means 10,000 Chinese people who work for that industry or that particular, automotive, parts manufacturer are now laid off or no longer getting jobs. So a lot of these people, right, are coming to the United States. Going, the future is looking a little more bleak because of the geopolitical strains on China. This is something a lot of people don't talk about. The geopolitical risk of China is forcing big Chinese manufacturers to set up shop elsewhere. China now is feeling what Americans have felt for a long time with outsourcing.
I was just going to say,
China. Now they're seeing what it feels like. And let me tell you, a lot of people think that the Chinese are a bunch of China girls with their Michael Kors handbags shopping in Paris and New York, right? And $1,000 shoes. Well, there might be 1 million Chinese like that, which is probably more than the population of Boston, Massachusetts, right? Obviously.
Right.
But China is a country of 1.1 billion people. And I assure you that more than 500 million of them cannot even come close to affording a Michael Kors handbag, let alone a knockoff Michael Kors handbag.
Right. Or maybe new shoes every quarter.
or maybe new shoes every quarter. And those are the guys who were once making your iPods and making your iPhone that's now made in India. And those
Wow.
guys are coming across the border. Those are the guys who are coming across the border. I think if they can get here, if they
Right.
can get here, and if they can't get here, and if they can't get here, then they're in some dire straits. And so China has to figure out a way to give these guys gainfully employed, which is why we have a situation in China where they just overproduce, right? Because full employment is very important to the Chinese provincial leaders and
Mhm.
the CCP in Beijing. So this is why we have this problem of, hey, look, what, the Americans want EVs? Let's start a new EV car company that no one's heard of called KENNETH. You know, we're going to make a whole bunch of them. We're going to sell them for $10,000 to Mexico. Voila, here we are. And so now we have 100% tariffs on Chinese EVs because that's all they do. They're producing cars, not for the local market because they don't
Right.
have, because people don't have the money like we have here in the West. They're selling it for us. But again, Ken, back to Mexico. I don't know the solution. I think one of the things with Mexico would be, you say this to Mexico, and I think Trump would do this better than Biden. Mexico, either you figure out a way to close that border, and I don't care if Chinese are coming through or Saudi Arabians are coming through. I don't care if it's none of your people that are coming through, but either you close that border for us, or we're putting a 25% tariff on every Mexican-made car that comes into this country and every Mexican-made refrigerator and air conditioner and whatever. Now, you know what's going to happen there is Ford, GM, Tesla, Frigidaire. They're going to go talk to their congressman,
Yep.
and they're going to lobby and say, you got to do something about this. And they're going to go to Mexico City and they're going to talk to their elected officials in their representative provinces and say, you guys got to do something about this. You're going to get free lobbying once you say that. And maybe in that case, you at least at the very least solve the immigration crisis, which again, the NAFTA was supposed to do, because all the Mexicans were going to stay home and work. They weren't all going to come to the United States to supposedly pick our strawberries and, carve chickens and beef, which, they do certainly.
Yeah, and do my lawn, which I've done for the last 20 years myself.
Yeah, we need more migrants to do. We need to get more migrants in here. So I'm not against immigration, but I mean,
I know, and see, that's the thing.
Now everybody agrees is insane. Everyone agrees now is insane that you're not being invited. You're being invited by a handful of people, right? In the regime and in NGOs.
Yes.
And it's politically motivated, and it's designed basically to, if Trump wins, to say, haha, Trump said he's going to deport, haha, he can't. It's designed to make a complete disaster of that. Maybe even, who knows, get some NGO to get some of these guys to vote illegally, and we'll find out 3 years later that it happened.
Right.
Who swing states? Who knows? That's not our fight at the Coalition for a Prosperous America. But I could tell you, Mexico,
understandable, yeah.
Mexico is definitely our fight now, as was China, and we need leaders, whether it's Trump or Biden, to figure out if we want a low-wage, free trade nation on our border, if we really want that. Because over time, yes, you will innovate, you will come up with the new bigger and better mousetrap, but it's all going to be made in Mexico. It's all going to be made in Asia. You're not going to. And then when you're sitting there crying because, oh no, we're in a war, I'm just saying, because this is what, Washington loves all this foreign policy intrigue, as I said, right? This is one thing you get them all.
Well, it's a cash machine. No matter what happens, some people make big money off war.
People make big money off war. But again, but one of the things on the war side, of course, is the defense industry, right? Oh, we can't build. We can't build a submarine without China. We can't build an aircraft carrier without
There you
Mexico.
go.
Okay, well, you know why you can't build an aircraft carrier without Mexico? You know why you can't build a drone plane, whatever it is, or autonomous sea vehicle without China, without Mexico? Is because you innovated it, you invented it here, but you decided you were going to make it all there. So now you don't have this, you don't have this product, you don't have that, because it's all gone. So okay, don't cry when you decide that you need it, and your partner, China or whoever else, says, hey, we need it too, so we can't give it to you. Or hey, you're our enemy now. We're not going to sell you this widget to make this weapon that's going to be used against us. So if you can either have an industrial base in the United States or you can't. And I think that you can't if you're going to have a free trade, low wage nation on your border. Just as China ate into the manufacturing base in the United States, Mexico is going to, over time, as companies start leaving Mexico. You're going to see Mexico start leaving China. You're going to start seeing Mexico become a more of a big concern than it ever was before. And NAFTA come into question.
What I found interesting, well, so much of what you're saying is interesting, and I think our audience is going to love this. This snapshot, this reality of where we are economically, especially going into the election. I don't know if you heard, there's a debate tonight. Did you hear? I saw it. Everybody's talking about it. I guess it's going to be, I'm not sure who's in it, but it's going to be big. It's going to be a big debate.
I think it's Ross Perot and
Yeah. Yeah, that's what it is. Al Gore. I'd like to see him again.
Yeah.
But the communist China situation is, I completely forgot about, they lay off people too. You know, I always forget that. Because I just think communist country, lines of detention camps and factories and everybody working, you know, and then I forget they're probably laying off larger proportions than we are, right? Obviously, because they have.
I would assume so. We don't know because you can't trust Chinese data, and China is never going to say unless they really want to. Unless they want to be crybabies about it, which they might, but I don't think that's their interest. They're not going to say, "Oh, because these evil Americans, you know, they're laying." I mean, they might say that at home, and if I could read Chinese and I was subscribing to some WeChats, I might be able to. I might be reading people saying, "Hey, you know, I lost my job because Apple went to, Foxconn lost their contract in China, and now Foxconn is building Apple phones in India, and man." I can't now. Now I'm driving a DD Uber, a DD car now, or now I'm doing delivery. You know what I mean? Or my son went to college and now he's working at a karaoke bar for the last 5 years, and he was wanting to be the next Jack Ma, and here we are, karaoke bar. So I mean,
so do you have kids? Do you have kids?
I have 2 kids.
Okay, so and what are their ages?
One is 20 and one is 22.
Oh my gosh, same.
No, wait, one is 20 and one is 23. Oh, man.
I had the same exact ages.
Yeah,
a 20-year-old son and a 23-year-old son.
All right, so
yeah, so what's to close with this, because I know you got a jet. What does this mean for, we'll probably be long gone, but what does this mean for our kids when they're 40 and their kids? And I mean, how is this shift? Can we turn this tide back, or are we just going to lose a lot of what we have in our republic just because of this globalism strangling us? Because I think our own government's allowing it. I mean, I see it with college grads all the time.
I'd like to know if I like to see a poll, of young people. Are
Mm-hmm.
you in favor of globalism? And you can define it better, define what it is. Would you be in favor of, say, I can't find a job in my hometown of New York City. I can't find a job. I can't live here. Would you be fine with saying, okay, well, I found a similar job in Panama. I'm going to go live in Panama, but I'm only going to make $5 an hour, but I could buy a nice $1,000 a month apartment in Panama right on the beach, and it's great. Do you like that? I don't know what they would say. Maybe they would say yes. Maybe they would say yes.
Gen Z,
realizing they're leaving their family and all their friends, and they're going to start a whole new life. Maybe they're fine with that. But I think honestly that look, the battle of our time, other than centralization versus decentralization, which is a battle of our time as well, but the other battle of our time is globalism versus the new rise of populism and nationalism in the West. That's the battle of our time.
And of course, it's a marketing battle too, because as you said, globalism has been glorified and amplified, and just like people make the green energy, they make it sexy, and globalism is like compassionate and caring, and capitalism is bad. But overall, if you look at Gen Z, the shift to the MAGA and Trump, the nationalism, and hey, we need to start protecting our own. I want to protect my own country, my own state, and not worry about what's happening in the EU. That's actually trending fairly well. And I just want to mention this, because this was in your article, and this was really a wake-up call for me, especially you're from the Northeast. And here we have in Mexico, 2,300 square foot home in Nuevo Leon, 3-bed, 2-bath, $220,000.
There you go. Okay, so there you go.
That explains it all.
Yeah. So back to Ken and Ken's Widget Factory.
Yep.
We can hire a manager in the Bay Area in Marin County for $1 million a year or $500,000 a year, because he has to buy $1 million house for his beautiful wife and his 2 kids.
At least $1 million.
Right? Or we can pay him $300,000, 70% less or 50% less, and he can live like an absolute king in Nuevo Leon, and his young kids who can go on an adventure living in Mexico for 2 or 3 years and learning Spanish.
There you go.
Who's saying no to that? I don't know.
I know.
Globalism has been sold, I think, Ken, because people view it like, people who aren't politically minded, but the apolitical among us, of which is the majority, have been sold on it as being a one world kumbaya. I get to eat, lamb
Yep.
rogan josh, and I get to eat, Jamaican chicken and jerk chicken from Jamaica, and I get to speak 3 different languages in my own community. Isn't that great? So they see it as sort of a multicultural, globe-trotting, jet-setting weekend in Italy, and I get to go on vacation on the Amalfi Coast, and isn't it beautiful sort of lifestyle? But that's not how most people live. That's not how most people live.
That is true. It's like this
yeah.
culture. Everybody says, oh, the culture and the journey, it'll be so good for the kids. It'll be so good. And they always forget. And I think we both, to our credit, did a great job of keeping politics out of this for the most part. But let's not forget that a lot of these countries, their governments are so at odds with our Constitution and our independence. That's my biggest pushback. I mean, if I love the idea of an affordable house and a view of the ocean. A friend of mine lives in Mexico. You should see the view of the ocean they have. It's like, what are you, a billionaire? And they make about 90 grand a year.
Yeah, sure. I lived in Sao Paulo. I had a doorman, obviously, and I
lived a doorman.
I lived in a beautiful apartment. I had the red carpet going to my apartment. But not only that, I had a maid who cleaned my house. And
whoa, easy there, Mr. Elitist.
Yes, and I had my kids went to a private school right across the street from my house, and they had a crossing guard who walked them across the street a whole 2 minutes a whole 20 seconds across from their apartment. Yeah, I know.
Wow. Did you travel in a motorcade? Who are you?
I know. I had one of those big Cinderella carriages, and then eventually it turned into a pumpkin. But this is the globalist view, right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be great if I can have a Brazilian speaking maid and a Filipino gardener, and I can every weekend I can go to Tijuana. But again, that's not how most Americans live. Either you're going to be a service economy that's making money based on lobbying in Washington, D.C., which is where all the money is, right? Washington, D.C. in that area is now the richest part of the country, right? Because of government, right?
Oh, yeah.
Or you're going to be a Wall Street guy selling financial services to the Europeans because the Europeans have nowhere to invest, so they give us all their money.
Wow.
So in the meantime, if you're not working because you're not learning to code anymore because AI is coding for you. So junior coders.
Yeah, don't even get me started.
That's all done.
We have to do a whole show on AI, and I hope I can have you back. I want to get you back on the show.
Anytime.
Kenneth Rapoza, where can people find you and get some of this great knowledge about what's happening on our planet today?
Well, if you're interested in, the American economy and protecting America and making America great again, I guess if you're a Trump supporter I'm with the Coalition for a Prosperous America, and that's what we're all about. We're about America first. We want to have a strong American productive base, whether you are a tooling company that makes tools, or whether you're a rancher that's tired of competing with beef coming in from Bolivia and all these regulations that are telling you have to do this or that for the climate. That's destroying your family business so that your sons and daughters don't want to be farmers anymore. And so that we're relying on imported food, which is something that Americans don't realize, that we're now a net food importer. Most Americans think of us as a breadbasket nation, and we are if you only think about eating soybeans and corn, but most of us don't eat soybeans and corn every day. Yep. Everything else you eat is imported for the most part nowadays, and that was not the case. So, if you care about those issues, and that's what we fight for at the Coalition.
And where's that website?
And that's at prosperousamerica.org. That's where you can find me there, or you can find me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is from Forbes. It's called @Brickbreaker.
Brickbreaker.
Yeah, well, that was from my Forbes days. So
yeah. I like that.
And I talk about these issues there, and I also talk. It's kind of a personal Twitter. It's not so much tied to my work. I mean, I'm not always about work issues. I'm talking about the media or
Yeah, we do want to make it clear that Ken does not have an OnlyFans page.
Yeah, no, definitely not.
We just want to make that clear.
I'm not. I have to do a little better looking, and maybe I think about it when I get laid off or something like that. Because who knows? You know what I mean? It could happen. Yeah, you never know today.
Well, it's been a pleasure having you on the report, sir. And I hope, like I said, I'd love for you to come back. I love the knowledge you have and how these global pieces fit together.
Well, thanks for having me on, Ken. Appreciate it. Hopefully our business does well and we can stay in business in Nebraska and don't have to move the factory to Mexico.